He found one of the greatest treasure hauls of his time, gold and silver pulled from the ocean floor, recovered, documented, and returned to the English crown, because this wasn't just a recovery, it was a sanctioned expedition, backed by investors and by authority. At least, most of it was returned, because what history records is what was officially declared, not always what was kept. And that's where the question begins. Welcome to the world of the lost, where we explore mysterious and curious stories. Over the past few days, we've followed the trail, but now it's time to step back and look at the full picture. His first expedition was a success. In 1687, William Phips located the wreck of a Spanish treasure ship in the Caribbean. Using a diving bell, primitive by today's standards, his team recovered an enormous haul of gold and silver, coins, bullion, artifacts, wealth that had sat untouched beneath the sea. It was carefully recorded, accounted for, and brought back to England. The investors were paid, the crown recovered its share, and Phips became a very wealthy man. William Phips didn't begin his life anywhere near wealth. He was born in Maine, in what was then a rough colonial frontier. Accounts describe him as coming from a large poor family. He had no formal education, no clear path to power, but he had something else. He had drive, ambition, and a willingness to chase opportunity wherever it appeared. He went to sea. He learned the trade, listened, watched, waited, and eventually he heard the stories. Stories of Spanish treasure lost beneath the waves. And unlike most men, he didn't let those stories remain stories. He acted on them. That first expedition changed everything. The treasure he recovered did more than just make him wealthy. It made him important. He was knighted Sir William Phips, and not long after, he was appointed governor of the province of Massachusetts Bay. And that matters, because when a man rises that far, that fast, it doesn't just change his fortunes, it changes the expectations around him. More success, more recovery, more wealth returned to those who had backed him, and perhaps more to gain if he could do it again. So Phips returned to the same waters, hoping to recover more. But this time, the story changes. The treasure he brought back was only a fraction of what had been recovered before. Phips claimed the wreck had already been plundered, that others had reached it in the time between his voyages, that what remained was all that was left to find. And that may well be true, but it raises a question, because Phips had already proven what lay beneath the water. He knew the scale of it, he controlled the recovery, and in an age without modern oversight, how much of that treasure could have passed through his hands unrecorded? And if even a fraction did, where did it go? Treasure in the 1600s was not tracked the way we track wealth today. There were no digital records, no audits in the modern sense. What was recorded was what was declared. And what was declared depended on the man doing the declaring. Ships moved quietly across the Atlantic, cargo changed hands, gold could disappear into trade, into land, into influence. A coin recovered from the sea could become a payment, a favor, or something buried again. And once it left the official record, it effectively vanished. Now consider this. Artifacts have been found in Nova Scotia. A medallion, found far from where it was made. This wasn't just any object. Some have suggested it resembles a medallion reportedly granted to only a handful of people. Among them, figures connected to power and influence and the movement of wealth across the Atlantic. One name that enters that conversation is Sir William Phips. The medallion itself was reportedly discovered in a field in New Ross, Nova Scotia. Far from England, far from the Caribbean, and far from anywhere we can firmly place Phips in the historical record. But its design, its apparent rarity, and its location raise a quiet but persistent question. If it belonged to William Phips, and he was never recorded being in Nova Scotia, how did it get here? And then there are iron spikes found on Oak Island, dating to the 1600s, with compositions similar to items linked to Phips' home in New England. None of this proves a connection, but it does create a pattern because these are not just random objects. They are pieces of a time in history, a network, a movement of people and materials across the Atlantic world. And then there's Oak Island, a place long associated with buried treasure, unexplained structures, and centuries of speculation. There is no record that William Phips was ever there, no document placing him in Nova Scotia. But records, as we've seen, don't always tell the whole story. If even a portion of that treasure was never returned to the Crown and investors, if it moved quietly outside official accounts, if it passed through the hands that had the means to hide it, then it's not impossible that some of it ended up somewhere else entirely. Not in England, not in Spain, but here in Nova Scotia. We know Phips found treasure. That part is history. But what history doesn't always tell us is what happened to everything, because the real mystery isn't just what happened, it's what might have been left behind. Moved, not reported, or even hidden. And if even a fraction of it still exists, then the question remains, where did the rest go? I hope you've enjoyed this look at Sir William Phips and why some people see the connection to the treasure hunt on Oak Island. If so, please give this video a like and subscribe for more stories of mysteries surrounding Nova Scotia and the Atlantic. Until next time, stay curious.